Welcome back to the Psychedelic Scene Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Sitnick. Think of me as your psychedelic big sister who helps you understand all the psychedelic stuff that you keep hearing about. Today, I am joined by Curt Kearney, a psychotherapist with decades of clinical experience working at the intersection of psychedelics and internal family systems, also known as IFS. You'll find this conversation interesting if you want to hear about a specific strategy for trauma healing. I used IFS throughout my MDMA treatment for PTSD. In this conversation, we go deep into how parts work, why imagination matters in healing, and how psychedelics can support trauma work without becoming the whole story. So if that sounds interesting, get ready for a lovely conversation with Curt, and let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Psychedelic Scene Podcast. I am thrilled today to be joined by Curt Kearney. Curt, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jill. Great to be here.
So everyone, Curt is a psychotherapist who works with psychedelics and internal family systems, otherwise known as IFS. And when he popped up on my list of people who are interested in appearing in this podcast, I kind of jumped at it. And so just to level set folks out there, when I went through my MDMA therapy for PTSD, my therapist and guide both used IFS, and in my coaching practice, I use IFS. So I am super excited about this conversation, diving into the intersection of psychedelic work and IFS. And Curt has a new book out there. He was so kind, he gave me a little bit of a peek, and I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. So with that said, Curt, can you give our audience your origin story? How the heck do you find yourself talking on the Psychedelic Scene Podcast?
Great. Yeah, thanks. So I guess, kind of professionally, I've been a therapist, it feels like forever. I was one of those strange people in college. I knew what I wanted to do. So yeah, in one form or another, God, I've been in clinical work for 35 years, and psychedelics, I think, really led me to that. When I was a teenager, I was going through some really bad mental health stuff, like really bad. This was in the mid 1980s. There wasn't much available in terms of medicines. Like SSRIs weren't around. I saw a psychiatrist and he was like, well, we could give you something, but you basically just sleep all day. I think it was probably trazodone, I'm guessing. And I was like, oh, thanks, no thanks. I was seeing an excellent therapist, but it just wasn't touching it. And so I was really desperate. And, my therapist actually dropped a little breadcrumb. Just as I was leaving his office one day, he said, people who have taken LSD have said it's helped their mental health quite a bit. And I was just like, this was like Reagan's second term, war on drugs. It was a nasty time for all this. It was really oppressive. So this was like a huge risk that he would even mention that, especially to a minor. But, it stuck with me. And I thought, all right, I think I kind of got it. He gave me a hint. And that was about all he could give me. So I researched, read everything I could, found the old, the first Western psychedelic renaissance from like the 1950s, 60s, early 70s, found these old journals that were literally covered in dust in the Northwestern University Library because this stuff was so verboten. It was toxic to even, talk about this stuff professionally. But I found these old studies and they were like, this psychedelics are safe, medically safe. They're effective. These were outcome studies. They weren't randomized control trials. Those didn't exist at the time. It just floored me. So I really went on a quest and was like, how do you do this safely? How do you do it well? So I read all, everything I could get my hands on. Tried to find LSD. That was hard, but eventually did. And me and a friend, we worked with LSD. And it really changed the trajectory of my mental health path. And it was not like, oh, I'm great, I'm fine. But I think it gave me a sort of a vision of there was a road that, that I had to walk, but that there was a road and that, I could walk it, like that sense of agency. And so that's really how I got started with this stuff. And, and then I pretty quickly decided, yeah, I want to work with this, with people. I want to try and help people with this. And it was like, it's so deeply illegal. I can't do that. So got into psychotherapy and, as a student and then a professional, and really, and I was always trying to think, how can I make the therapy that I'm doing with people sort of the most psychedelic as is legally possible. So I worked in like wilderness expeditions, that kind of thing. Those can be very psychedelic in a really slow, powerful, wonderful way. Got really into Jung, that can be very psychedelic, the mind manifesting, the soul manifesting. And part of what I was doing was trying to figure out, like, okay, given the power of psychedelics, like me and my friends, everyone I talked to would work with psychedelics. Like, sort of the first question after working with psychedelics was, well, the first statement was maybe, wow. And then their first question was, now what? Like, what can this be combined with? So I was lucky enough to stumble across IFS really in Brazil, in the middle of ceremony in Brazil, and was like, wait a minute, what if I treated my internal family, or sorry, my internal world like it was family, as opposed to maybe, this paranoid adventure. What's good in here? What's bad in here? What do I need to get rid of? What do I need to be strong about? But what if, it's like internal family, that phrase, I was like, I think I need to check this out. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I really feel like psychedelic practice for, for mental health, there's religious practices with psychedelic. There are lots of practices with psychedelic. I'm sort of in, talking about like mental health, which is not the end all be all of psychedelics. I just want to respect that. Psychedelics are very big, but I really feel like psychedelics and IFS are just a really natural pairing and powerful pairing for mental health practice. So yeah, so I've just been digging in on that, and then that turned into my book, and yeah, and then I guess here we are.
Can't I can't agree more. When I was first introduced to the concept of parts, it just clicked. It just clicked because I really did feel like there were internal struggles. I was very much aware there was a Jill, and then there were other things. All right, so before we get going, since the two of us kind of know what we're talking about, you, of course, are the expert, let's give the audience, for folks who, our audience is very educated in the psychedelic space. Not everybody might be educated in the IFS space. So if you wouldn't mind, could you give us an IFS kind of just 100 level, just to level set what this is for folks?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so IFS is a form of psychotherapy. It was developed by a guy named Richard Schwartz in the late mid 80s. And some of the sort of axioms of IFS are that our psyches are diverse. We don't just have one perspective. We sort of don't just have one psychology per person, that there are these different aspects of ourselves, or different parts of ourselves, as they're commonly called, who really have autonomy and have their own perspectives and their own intentions and their own jobs and their own struggles and their own personalities. And when there's trauma or deprivation in someone's life, the roles of this internal family can get very, very split and very polarized or very antagonistic. Yeah, there can be a young part who winds up young part of ourselves who winds up carrying the direct experiences, let's say, of the trauma, the deprivation, the fear, the terror, the sadness, the hopelessness. And that's really heavy stuff. And then there can be another part of us, and it's just another inner child, another really young child who can come in and say, this is too dangerous. This is going to take the person down. This is like noxious. This is like radioactive. I need to get rid of this, So there can be all sorts of attempts
to be able to move forward, to be able to live,
to
survive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the best of intentions, right, to survive, to live, to make it through, I've got to get rid of this. So this is this process of exiling.
Yeah.
There are tons of ways of doing that. It could be trying to be very smart. It could be trying to be very drunk. It could be just spacing out. It could be being very aggressive. Anything to get rid of this. But it never works because these are parts of ourselves. It's like trying to fight your spleen. Yeah, you're never going to win that battle. Yeah. So then there's this.
Actually, I might have to steal that line. That's a great line.
Use it. Because I think these things to me sort of map with our biology, with our bodies. Not one to one, but we have diverse bodies, we have diverse psyches. I think that's really important. So we can get into then we're in this horrible like internal conflict. Like everyone pretty much who shows up in psychotherapy, if you say like, is there internal conflict going on? They're like, yeah, that's why I'm here. So IFS can help us get the internal family where we're not fighting each other. But we can be a harmonious, loving internal family. There can be internal friendship, teamwork, love, supporting each other, because these are all inner children. And there's one piece that is probably, there's lots of psychologies who have done, like Freud, internal object relations, Jung with complexes, yada, yada, yada. We could go on. There are lots of psychologies that have looked at basically parts, but IFS brings something really special. This idea of self, which is usually written with a capital S, that there's more to us than just our inner children. That there's something about each of us that is undamaged, undiminished by trauma, and that doesn't have to develop, it doesn't need like adequate parenting or adequate developmental circumstances to develop, that we each are self. And one way of thinking of it could be like us as beings, maybe. And that if we can get some space from the internal children who can be taking us over in this battle, in this cacophony, if we can get some space, not only can we then help our inner children, but in IFS, really the patient or the client is the most effective person to help their inner children. So that's profound. And again, I think there are other, if you look at maybe Buddhism, maybe Buddha nature, like maybe if you look at the Western religious traditions, we're made in the image of God. Again, there are these, in some ways they aren't new ideas, but IFS and Richard Schwartz and his collaborators have made this all very practical,
tangible.
Yeah, you can do it in an hour of therapy. Yeah, so I think maybe that's a bit about IFS.
And to make it even more at my level, because I'm not a psychotherapist, I think it was helpful for me when my therapist and I kind of agreed to start naming some parts by age. And it was even okay if there were multiple parts at the same age. Oh, this is fifth grade. This is Jill 5 abandoned. This is Jill 5 malnourished. And even in my book, I've got malnourished Jill. I've got perky Jill. I've got, 5 different Jills, and they all had different roles. Age 5 was pretty horrific. My mother attempted suicide with a shotgun. There was lots of trauma that was never, ever dealt with. And, if you think about the idea that when trauma happens pretty much any time in our lives, in my instance, it just happened to be a lot of it during childhood, when we don't have a community or adults to help us work through that trauma, those little children can get stuck. That's my third grade way of explaining it, because that was the way my therapist was very kindly explained it to me, that those little parts got stuck in time, and that's all they know. They don't know adult Jill. They don't know anything else because they got stuck in time. And all of a sudden I went from, well, I've got to get rid of these parts, because I was like, corporate girl, control freak, type A. I got to get rid of this. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, I don't need to get rid of them. I need to help them realize that they are not trapped in that particular, I'm going to use the word time loop, because that's kind of the way we thought about it.
Right.
And all of a sudden, for me personally, it allowed my imagination to go. It allowed me a flexibility that I'm not sure, it just really happened to work beautifully for me. I know IFS doesn't work for everyone, but for me, and then adding, and I'm going to be asking the expert here, adding the psychedelic component, which just blasted my neuroplasticity, out the wazoo, to really change, to really allow those inner children to think differently. I mean, it was like, 100x the normal process in some ways. So like, how did you, well, I don't really want to jump your story per se. I'm super curious about like what your experience was with the combination, psychedelics and IFS. Did you see, was the experience similar to mine? Like, oh, wow, rocket ship kind of growth, or was it slower? Or, what's your experience in the field with a variety of clients? Me, I'm just me.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you. That makes it very concrete. And yeah, I do. I think there can be that rocket ship kind of thing. But again, even if we add in the rocket ship of psychedelics for healing, and there can be obviously, profound healing experiences during a psychedelic session, and to maybe explore that a little bit, and then, come back to the rest of your question. Maybe some of that, I think, profundity, or profundity of healing can be that these parts of us they're not their burdens, they're not their jobs, they're not the deprivation, they're not the fear, they're not the exiling. That's stuff that they got forced into or got splatted onto them. So one thing that can happen in a psychedelic session is the parts of us can get some freedom from their burdens, and they can start to see themselves as just a wonderful child. And that can be super profound, like, rocket ship profound, but then again, then we're back to the thing of, then what? What do you do with that? So many people come out of a psychedelic ceremony, or even just, working with friends or at a music festival, and they've had this truly profound, truly healing experience. And then it's like, what do I do with this? Even just what happened to me? It can be bewildering. The healing can be so powerful. It can be bewildering deeply. So I think then IFS can bring something really valuable, that we can get into ongoing relationship with these parts of ourselves. A family, again, this idea of family, a family it's not a one-time experience. A family are ongoing relationships. So finding these parts of ourselves that now we see are these wonderful little children who have been alone, right? And they've been stuck in this time loop. And they've been only in contentious relationships, and they've been in very isolated. Maybe they only know their protector is trying to exile them. Maybe they only know, the exile who they're trying to get rid of. They might have been only in this like sort of two-person relationship for many, many years, And for them to come out and to be in relationship with, with us as selves, and then to come into the relationship of our world in the present time, because they're not stuck in that time bubble. That, and I think that gets into integration, which is so key for healing.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I was just so interested in what you were saying. It was curious when I was talking about the 100x of healing, that happened with me with a purposely higher dose LSD journey, because I knew I was working with an exile that was very, very deeply protected, using your terminology. I will say, though, that the majority of my IFS work was done during integration, where I did get to have that family around. In my book, and we're going to talk about your book in a few minutes. In my book, I talk about the idea of introducing my younger Jills. I think 5, 9, 16, and even 19. 19 was pretty brutal in my life. Introducing them to my current home and them learning that there was a future, because those ages had no idea that there was actually going to be a future. The future was so bleak. And so I really loved the idea of what you just said, that during integration, you continue to engage with those family members. And I'm going to put words in your mouth, so I'm going to hope that you correct me in a moment. You continue to engage with those family members to let them know they no longer need to do the job that they think they need to do, because there is an adult in the room. I'm sure there's a better way to say that.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think that's beautiful and profound and really important. And I might add that they have stuff to offer. They're not just, they're not just passive, dependent little inner children, even when they're healed. They have wonderful qualities, maybe playfulness, maybe courage, maybe joy, maybe honesty, connection. I think that's where the internal family, some of the best stuff in my life are my healed inner children helping me out. I have 3 literal kids. I learned so much from my literal kids, and I learned so much from my inner kids. Yeah. But that there's an adult in the room, that it's not on them. They can contribute, but it's really important, sort of, and this Richard Schwartz was originally a family therapist, working with literal families. And there's this idea in the school of family therapy called structural family therapy, of really getting into rightful roles. Like, let the kids be kids and let the grown-ups be the grown-ups. This can get out of whack in a lot of families. Maybe there's a super depressed kid, and that kid winds up kind of running the family because the family's, so
responding to that.
Yeah. And that's really hard for that kid, and it's really hard for the family. So structural family therapy can be like, let the kid be a kid, let the parents be parents, and that there's an adult in the room. And I also just want to say, I know you're interested in imagination. And I love what you were saying, that it sounds like in your healing, it freed up your imagination. I think that's so important.
So let's normalize for the audience for a second. We have a very sophisticated audience, an audience that's very sophisticated with psychedelics. So they are very comfortable in the realm of seeing things, experiencing things that they know are in the mind. I wish I had a better understanding of a therapeutic process. I had been to some therapists growing up because of the childhood. None of them used any sort of imagination strategies. And that's okay. I think, my personal opinion, but my opinion in a dollar bill doesn't even get you a cup of coffee anymore. But I tend to think that the permission from my therapist and guide to use my imagination to welcome and incorporate and chat with my inner children And my other parts, I had an overworking part on a treadmill that I would check in with. I had an Amazonian part, and she was ready to fight when I needed her. She was like a steel beam down my back. And the openness from my therapist to say, oh, what do your parts look like? What are they doing? What do they want to talk about? And the permission for an English major who loves imagery to do that, it made it all come alive for me. And so I would love to pitch that question to you. In your opinion, do some clients really enjoy the imaginative part? Do some people really hate it? Like, where are you finding in the spectrum the importance of imagination? Because trust me, I know Jill's experience is not everybody's experience.
I think that's, and again, I think you're right on. I think you're hitting a nail on the head, a really important nail. Again, I think we can look historically. I think, in my education, I think Jung was maybe the first real champion of imagination in psychotherapy. And some of his followers like James Hillman really built that out. And the importance of that our psyches manifest in imagination. And it's not just random static. It's not just mental static. If you can tune into it, if you can respect it and be with it and get in relationship with it, it's your diverse psyche. It's your soul, and it's peopled by all these different agents. So no, I think what you're saying is so important. And obviously that's another area of great overlap with psychedelics, that not just like visuals, but I think, I take imagination very, very broadly. Like, I think it can show up in our bodies, in our emotions, in synchronicities, in the external world. I know that's maybe controversial. Some people, can get wooey, if a bug, Jung had this case report, a patient of his had a dream about a particular beetle, a scarab beetle, and there was this knocking at the window during the session, and it was really annoying both of them. So he finally went over and opened the window, and a scarab beetle, which do not typically live in Switzerland, flies into the office. And that was a profound experience for this woman. I think for her, I would say, of her then being able to respect and connect with her imagination as it may be, showing up in the world. So yeah, I think IFS is so good with that, to be able to find our inner children. Again, it doesn't have to be images. It could be images, but it can be emotions. It can be atmospheres. It can be intuitions.
It can be somatic. It can absolutely be somatic.
Yeah.
Making that connection, allowing yourself to make that connection.
Right. If we stay with just sort of the verbal and the very analytic, then all that other stuff, it can look just like static. So I think IFS and I think psychedelics can broaden our salience of what's important, what's going on here. This feeling in my body, is it just, that maybe I slept weird, or is this really important psychologically, and can I get in relationship with it? What's showing up here? Obviously I think, everyone knows the word psychedelic is from the Greek roots, psyche for mind or soul, and delos for daybreak or revealing. The psyche or the soul, we get it manifests. We get to see it, and I think we see it in our imagination.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Can we, for folks who are new to IFS, can we talk a bit about the self? And I want to start that conversation with a very focused psychedelic point first. I remember in the midst of, after healing the the intense PTSD, no longer suicidal, no longer on that scale, but definitely dealing with the CPTSD. You don't, none of us escape childhood unscathed, right? So I was digging and I was working with different medicines, understanding how they work with trauma, things of that sort. And I went on one retreat with the sole intention of who was Jill before her parents got a hold of her? And if you phrase it differently in IFS terms, I was actually looking for who the self was. Where is the self? I was starting to understand with the psychedelic work I had done so far that there was a Jill and there were different parts, but I didn't yet really have a sense of who is that Jill. And I had this like magical idea that, oh, I was going to strip everything away and I was going to see that Jill. That isn't really the way that it happened. But I'm just curious if you can speak to the self. And I know I have a meditation that I still go back to where my parts are kind of over here hanging out and I'm at the self. And even though my parts, there are few and far between that are actually triggering anymore, it's still a very calm place. Like, can you speak to the audience about what self is, why it's something to think about and maybe work towards, or maybe work towards is the wrong word. Help educate me and clean up the wording that I just used.
I think it's really complex. It's really hard to talk about. So I get you. So I'll maybe throw out some confusing words myself. But I love your story. It reminds me of an old Zen koan where, the question is, show me your face before your parents were born. So you had a really interesting sort of koan there, a really powerful one. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I love your question. Who is Jill? Who was I before my parents got a hold of me? And I think the punchline, if this was a joke, the punchline is, this is it. Right here.
That's exactly the punchline.
Right. And it's profound. Most of Western psychology is very tied into development. I think it's part of our materialist worldview, which can be a great, powerful thing. That if there's a self, you have to build it. That's a developmental sort of materialist assumption brought into it. IFS does something really funky. It's like, no, you're it. This is it. And so that it's a totally different paradigm. It's really a non-developmental paradigm, which is, profound difference. And it's clinically so important because the idea is that who we each are is, this will maybe take some unpacking, but who we each are happens to be compassionate, curious, courageous, connected, the 7 C words. Yeah, patient, and they're P words, patient, persistent, playful, has perspective. And so this is a really profound thing that I see in pretty much every psychotherapy session that I do, that if you can get the young parts who are maybe trying so hard to do their jobs because they're stuck in those time loops, if you can get them to give some room to unblend, as it's called in IFS, it's not to get rid of them. It's to get in these rightful roles. It's like, hey, don't sit on my face.
Right.
I have a hard time being here with you if you're sitting on my face. I can be with you if you're 3-4 feet away, or if you're nuzzled under my arm, So it's not trying to get rid of the parts. It's just like, can you unblend for me so we can be together? Then what we find is, how do you, that's the big question in IFS. How do you feel towards this part of yourself? And it's ridiculous. When people unblend, they're like, oh my God, I love her. I feel she's been through so much. She's so beautiful. I just want to hold her, or I want to know this part of me better. Why is it hurting so bad? What's been going on? So this curiosity or this compassion, or this perspective, like, wow, I get them. They're doing what they need to do. People, when they're in self, they have these qualities. I think it's it's a really profound thing about a statement about human nature that is repeatable in every hour of therapy, and and really in psychedelic sessions, that when we show up as self, all of us are, compassionate, connected, have perspective, can have playfulness. It's just natural. It's like, okay, what does this say about human beings? It's a very positive and repeatable, testable, statement about human beings. And then as self, we can help heal these inner children. They primarily want us. They don't primarily want the therapist. Like, my job as an IFS therapist is primarily to help people unblind, then they cook.
Yes.
If I say, "Oh, this young part of you is just doing what it needed to do to survive," that's nice. But if they can say to this part of themselves, "I get you. Thank you. You tried to keep me alive, and you had to do horrible things maybe to do it. And I thank you for your diligence, and you don't need to do that job anymore. Would you like to maybe shift your job?" Then that part can heal. And it's in relationship with the patient as self where the most profound healing happens. And this happens, and I think, to bring psychedelics into it, like, in a way, this is so profound and so wonderful. Why do we need psychedelics? We can do, I think we can do all this with IFS therapy. And we can do this in an hour of therapy for most people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we get into like treatment resistant cases. That was me. I had an excellent therapist. I loved the guy. We were cooking. We were doing really good work. Wasn't touching what was going on with me.
Yeah, I would also add layers. I think with certain folks, okay, you're nodding your head. You understand what I'm trying to say. I think IFS for me would have worked for maybe the middle third. When I was in crisis, there was no way I was going to deal with that. I needed to deal with the fear. I needed to deal with that kind of stuff. The middle part, straight talk therapy, IFS probably would have worked. But for that little 5-year-old that saw her mother in that situation, to unearth that, Jill Sitnick needed a psychedelic. Not that everybody else would have, but I think what you just said is correct, that in some clients, there are some situations that need I'm thinking of that big, what are those big giant excavator things called? Whatever they're called. They need that kind of equipment to help them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. And so, again, the combination of IFS and psychedelics for some people, I think, is really necessary, or the combination of psychedelics and something that can get to that level of like relational, soulful healing is necessary. Psychedelics can bring so much power. They can be, you're bringing a rocket. And sometimes to get to some of those, to get to your little 5-year-old, you needed a rocket.
I really did.
Feeling.
Yeah. But I wouldn't have known that. I mean, kudos to my therapist and my guide for very gently using MDMA in the very beginning, because there's no way I would have known even to move further. So, Curt, you were very kind. I had a very weedy and IFS question that I threw at you before this, and you were so kind and you answered it. And you answered it by letting me peek into your book, which now I'm like, I need to get the book. Give us an idea of why the book, what's in it, how it's structured, like who should read it. And I don't usually, this is not like a promo for Curt. He did not ask this. It's only because he gave me a sneak peek and I was reading it and I was saying, I need to read this. I need to read it so that I can be better informed for my clients. So I automatically know I'm an audience, but like, give us your spiel. Like, who'd you write it for? Why'd you write it?
Yeah, well, all right. So I hate to say it. I think I primarily wrote it for myself.
Okay, that works.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, that cliche, write the book you need to read. Mm-hmm. I was looking for, again, I'm in Brazil. I'm like internal family. oh dear, this is really important. That was, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what is this IFS stuff? And it was very clear to me, yeah, this can work together with psychedelics, but it's like, how do you get there? How do you bring them together practically? There were no books. you know? So I researched a ton and did a bunch of training programs and had some wonderful relationships. Like, Dick Schwartz was super supportive. He helped me a lot with the book. Yeah, I love the guy. And
He might
somebody
be
else.
he might be one of the most generous people on YouTube in terms of openly giving meditations out to help people through this. So yeah, great guy.
Right. So generous. So
Yeah.
generous. Yeah. So I really wanted the primary audience, I hate to say it, was me as a therapist and as someone who needs healing. How do I bring these together? And then I'm like, okay, if I'm going to take all these notes and try and figure this out, I want to put this out there for other people also. So it's written, I wrote it primarily in a way for therapists. That was like the main audience, because it gets pretty damn technical.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think, IFS is so natural. It's our own relationship with our own psyches, and psychedelics are so natural. You work with a psychedelic, you don't need to have read anything about psychedelics. It's not like you need, like, taking a class before you work with psychedelics. So this stuff is so natural that I think anyone can relate to it. But yeah, so you asked about the structure of the book. The first part of the book is kind of overviews, like, of IFS and psychedelics in the West and psychedelic history. There's a little bit of theory on psychedelics. And then the middle part of the book, there's a chapter on preparation work using IFS for preparing for psychedelic work. And I have some wonderful case material in there, and which is some of what you started to, the stuff I said you started to see. And then the next chapter is on IFS in medicine sessions. So actually, in the actual day, how might IFS help with that? And then the third major chapter is on integration work. How can you bring IFS into these ongoing relationships? And I was really lucky to find a lot of really good case material, both from my practice. You mentioned Dick Schwartz. He's got videos, out on the internet. So I'm like, perfect. People can watch a video of a session and we can go through it in the book. And there's some published case material that's just really, really powerful, like from Andy and Michael Mithofer's work. Tom Schroeder has a great book called Acid Test that has some wonderful case material that I was able to unpack in terms of IFS. Yeah, and then there's some conclusion stuff where I sort of let myself off the leash and, like, what do I think about this? And, I'm able to just sort of spout for a couple chapters. So that's kind of the structure of it.
With the hubris of the author.
Yeah, it was fun writing the conclusion stuff.
So what I'm hearing is, if any facilitator out there is very curious about IFS, this is IFS in their practice. This is a book to, pick up, think about. And if you are brand new to IFS, go ahead, check out. On YouTube, it's a very, very quick search. I've actually just referred clients straight to the YouTube videos. They're right there. It's fantastic. All right. My favorite question. Get ready. What's the question that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Sorry, but as I'm musing on this, there's a radio show in Chicago that I love. It's called This Is Hell. It's like a leftist political sort of comedy show.
Okay.
And he asks, at the end of every interview, he asks his guests the question from hell. So I'm trying to think what would be all right. I think maybe a good question from hell is, like, what would be the downsides of psychedelics? What would maybe even be the downsides of IFS? We've said all this glowing positive stuff. Maybe, yeah, maybe what are critical perspectives or down?
Well, actually, have you come across, have you come, I've actually come across clients, it was part of my question to you. I have come across clients who were not quite ready for kind of the entire IFS 1 hour kind of session, the way that a session would go. Like they're not ready. They kind of shut it down halfway through. So it's not always a slam dunk. So maybe that is the question to ask. When are or have you seen this not really work well, the combination?
Yeah, right. There are, I think, in terms of IFS, yeah, there's some people who really hate the idea of seeing themselves in parts and needing to heal their own parts. Maybe they've been very deprived in childhood and they don't want to have to take care of themselves again in therapy. Yeah. So that can be heavy. That can be one area where, this can be really, really tricky. And I think it's really important to understand what's that person going through. And if we say like, that you can heal yourself, and they're saying, God damn it, that's what everyone
I've been doing all that work.
Do it yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I've experienced two people voice why, if there's no one else to love me.
Yeah. So these, and these are really profound questions. And I think they draw on us a lot as practitioners. How do we respond to someone who's, just really suffering that profoundly? And maybe not just try to mechanically apply a model.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is, if there are situations where the model is not working, don't keep pushing. Monitor and adjust. Look at where the client is in terms of accepting this particular strategy. And, it's okay to shift strategies, I'm going to assume, depending on the client's needs. What's your feedback? Because you're the expert. Yeah. I am not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there also can be a thing, within IFS that the therapist or the coach is there as self as well. So maybe they do need more contact with us as self. Maybe they really do need that external relationship. It's probably not going to be as quick and profound a healing, but if sometimes that's what people need. They really need us as self to be with their parts. Sometimes I've said to people, okay, we won't talk about parts. They really hate that. But I'll say, if it's okay with you, and I ask permission, I'll say, if it's okay with you, when you're talking, I'm going to be thinking about what part of you is talking and what are the relationships of that part with different parts of you. And generally people have said, fine, if you want, think whatever you want to think, but yeah, then it's more the therapist or the coach being there as self in the relationship. And I think that this kind of area is an area where psychedelic work can be helpful. I have seen it where people then maybe they start doing some psychedelic work and they become more open to, again, their psyches have manifested in the psychedelic session. They maybe see this little girl and they're like, oh, this is important. And they can maybe have a little bit of that self-to-part relationship with that little girl during a psychedelic session. And that's maybe it. They maybe just get this glimpse of this little girl, and they maybe feel this care and importance of this little girl. Maybe that's as far as it goes. But then that can come into the therapy and really let the therapy move forward more richly. And then I think there's questions of, maybe, what are the downsides of psychedelics?
Oh, absolutely. on my own channel where I talk about MDMA therapy, I am very, very clear. Psychedelics are not the answer for everybody. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. What's your perspective? They are.
Yeah.
What are your hard
I mean,
stuff?
I think there are, there are medical stuff that's being worked out. Let's say people with bipolar disorder, that's being researched.
Right.
I don't think there's a ton of clarity there yet. But more generally, a lot of times I think, well, if we talk about psychedelics as a rocket, I think people can come to see that healing is riding rockets, and over and over and over and over. And my sense, and I think IFS can be really helpful with this, is can we get off the rocket and start to build a life and live a life where we've gotten to? Can we get into relationship with our parts? Can we have ongoing relationship with our parts? And from there, can we be in relationship with our world more richly? Again, then rocket rides can be really important, but that, rocket rides are sort of not the point. It's not the point isn't to like live on a rocket necessarily.
It's how you handle 3 weeks later when you're stuck in traffic and really annoyed.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think if psychedelics become the end all be all, that's like the truth, or that's the only state that's considered valuable, it can really diminish our sense of our life. And
I would agree. Yeah.
And to some degree that happens. The profound effects of psychedelics can make other things seem drab. And that's, I think that can be a natural part of the process. And there can be maybe just slow patient integration work that needs to happen to, I love this line from Tommy from The Who. Tommy, he's like this sort of savior figure in the Who album. And he says to his followers, he says, if I told you what it takes to reach the highest high, you'd laugh and say nothing's that simple. That you can be looking for the biggest high, but sometimes maybe that can then lose sight of simplicity and the power of simplicity. So I think that can be a downside of psychedelics.
Yeah, I think my take on the downside of psychedelics, the way it's being described right now, still in the media, is the illusion that all of the healing happens during that particular journey, and people still not understanding the majority of the work is done in the preparation and integration. And so I think until more education happens, a downfall can be that people are going through these experiences and then not doing anything about them. And then kind of, if they aren't doing the rewiring, they're going to be in the same place a month later and repeating patterns. That there's just so much more that goes into it when you are motivated to make changes, I think is really what it comes down to. So that can be a disadvantage. I tend to think too, a curiosity is necessary. That if you don't have a curiosity about why something is showing up, or why you are behaving in a certain way, or why something is affecting you, that psychedelic work can be less effective. Maybe that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I like that. Curiosity. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. So I think for folks who aren't inherently curious, like I've seen people who have started to do some work and they get to a certain point that gets a little scary. And so the curiosity shuts down and they stop doing the work. And that's what it is. Whereas I'm ridiculously curious about my mind and really annoyed that I had the parents that I had that put some things in there, and I want to move forward. So I think curiosity is one of those things too.
Right.
Well, Curt, I think it's a shame that we are so far away. I think we could wind up having 3-hour coffee chats because this has been fascinating. I am absolutely going to catch up on the book because it's an area that I've had questions about when I'm working with folks. So I really appreciate you writing it.
Great. Thanks. Yeah. I hope you like it.
So there you go, everybody. This conversation with Curt really highlights something that I keep coming back to, And that's that psychedelics don't do the work for us, but they can open up the doors that make the deeper work possible. And if you're interested in how IFS and psychedelic experience can complement each other thoughtfully and responsibly, check out Curt's book and also find a few of Dr. Schwartz's sessions on YouTube. I've always found him very generous and the sessions to be incredibly helpful. And so with all of that said, if you enjoyed this content, head on over to psychedelicscene.com where you get these podcasts, you get a lot of psychedelic culture stuff, a whole bunch of music things. And if you really like the content, consider buying Jason, our founder, a little cup of coffee because he is the one who keeps the lights on. And so until next time, family, take care.